Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam Greensky, and I'm the Director of Operations here at Advisicon. And I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Resource Load Balancing with Project Leveling's Features and Capabilities. A quick summary of who we are at Advisicon. We're a group of authors, teachers, consultants, and technologists that are passionate about helping organizations learn, scale, and grow with a mix of methodology and technology to deliver results. No matter a company size, our team specializes in maximizing your business and personal productivity by leveraging the Microsoft technology experience. We offer bi-weekly webinars, which here at Advisicon we refer to as Webinar Wednesdays, in which we spend 30 minutes or sometimes an hour each week teaching topics ranging from Microsoft Project, Project Server, Project Online, Power BI, Visio, SharePoint, to project, program, and portfolio management, and methodology approaches. And with attending any of our weekly webinars, you receive free PDUs. Today's webinar is Resource Load Balancing with Project Leveling's Feature and Capabilities, in which you'll receive a half PDU. Now, before we get started, I just want to go over a couple things so you know how to best participate in today's event. So please make sure you review the control panel that should be on the top right of your screen. And this control panel gives you the option to adjust the volume, the mute button, the screen, and some other settings there. The audience is muted, so in order to ask questions, you'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter or to myself by typing questions in the questions pane of the control panel. And you can send your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll collect these and address these during the Q&A session, probably at the end of today's presentation. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Kevin Bruder. Kevin is one of Advisicon's senior project managers, and he's new to leading one of our Webinar Wednesday sessions, so we'll have to go easy on him. Kevin has a lot of experience in teaching for our clients, so we're lucky to be able to steal him away for today. So without further ado, welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Pam. So as Pam mentioned, today we're going to be talking about resource leveling. It's probably everyone's favorite feature of Microsoft Project, and that was a very bad joke because I know that most folks don't use the leveling feature. If you do use leveling, congrats, and hopefully you'll pick up a few tips here. If you don't worry, you're probably with the majority of the audience, and that's what the goal here is today, to kind of show you how the feature works, what it does, what it doesn't do, some ways you can use it, how to get started, some best practices. So today we're going to start by talking about what is leveling, what is it supposed to do theoretically, how does it work, how does it make changes to your schedule, how does it rebalance your resources, what are some best practices, and then we'll jump into a demo, which is my favorite part. So we'll probably spend most of our time in a demo showing you how the leveling feature works. And then at the end, as Pam mentioned, we'll have time to answer any questions. So please feel free to submit any questions you may have throughout the presentation at any point. So we'll get started. So to start off, we first must find out what is resource leveling. We've heard about it. It messes up our project plans. We don't like it. Everyone says don't click that button, right? But what is it? What is it, the intent? What is it supposed to do? So to understand resource leveling, we first have to understand over allocations. Now, if you've never done a resource loaded schedule, or if you're mostly managing schedules, say without resources or just a schedule rather than their actual work, this will be new to you. If you manage resource loaded schedules, you're probably very familiar with over allocated resources. For every resource in your schedule, whether you're using Project by itself or with an enterprise resource pool, such as when you're connected to Project Server or Project Online, every resource has an available capacity. So that might be 40 hours a week, say that someone's working. When their work assigned to them via tasks is extended beyond that capacity, so if they have more than 8 hours in a day or 40 hours in a week or whatever their capacity is configured to, they are considered over allocations. You may have seen this in your project files before. It's a small little red man icon that appears next to a task or a resource that is overallocated at some point within your schedule. When you are using a resource pool, which basically is when you're connected to Project Online or Project Server is the most common time you would be using a shared resource pool. Overallocations can actually be seen across multiple projects. So even if you just brought someone on your project, only assigned them a 2-hour task, and you got that red icon, and you're sitting there like, what? How is that possible? It's because in using the resource pool, you can actually see overallocations across many projects. Overallocations are not a good thing. Typically, if you actually have a resource loaded schedule and you're trying to manage your resource demand, overallocations are a good indication that your project is going to slip, that people aren't going to be able to get all the work done, and that the project is going to slide. And it's a very, very good indication because typically even resources working at their maximum capacity, right at the limit of their 40 hours a week, are still really overallocated because we never account for things like staff meetings or overhead or someone getting sick and having to take a couple hours, half day or full day off. So anytime they're overallocated, it's a very good indication that something in your schedule could cause a slide, an impact to your actual scheduled dates. So all that's not good. So how do we resolve that? Well, of course, we can resolve that manually, but Project has a built-in feature called resource leveling. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. The goal of resource leveling is to take those overallocations one by one and resolve them. And so let's talk a little bit about how that works. So, like I said, the goal of resource leveling is to resolve those overallocated resources. What resource leveling can do, the scope of its activity, is to take work from a time period when a resource is overallocated. So if someone has 9 hours of work on Tuesday, and the goal is to move some of that work to a period where they are not overallocated or where they will not become overallocated. And so say they have no assignments on Wednesday, leveling may take an hour of the work on Tuesday and move it to Wednesday. And so that's the general premise of how leveling works. Now that sounds very simple, but in reality, it's a very, very complex algorithm that ends up changing your dates and your schedule slides, and you're sitting here wondering what the heck just happened, and Project's telling me to need to do my testing before we've even developed the application, and nothing makes sense anymore. And so that's where people usually get caught with leveling. It sounds simple, but it's actually a very, very complex part of the scheduling engine. So because of the complexity, there's many, many options within leveling that you can change and tweak to be able to use it for what you need it for. So you can change whether overallocations are looked for on a day basis or on a week basis. So for example, that 8 hours a day, if they exceed 8 hours in one day, they would be overallocated. But if they only have 8 hours in that whole week, they're definitely not overallocated. And so you can change the settings on whether project looks day by day, or if it just looks week by week, or if it looks month by month. And you can even go the other way if you want to go hour by hour, if you manage your schedules down to a very granular level. You can also tell Project what to do in case of a tie. So you can set priority of one task over another or one project over another if you're doing leveling across projects. There's other configurable options such as telling leveling to only stay within the available Slack or float, which I believe is the topic of last week's webinar. You can tell it whether or not to split assignments. So that would be if someone starts work on one task, takes a break, does something else, and then finishes the work on that task again. And there's some other configurable items that you can change within your leveling options. Because of the nature of leveling will most likely change your dates in your project. It's going to move some tasks around. It may not affect your overall critical path. In fact, the goal of it is not to affect your overall critical path. And so leveling will attempt within its best ability to move those tasks that have the most amount of slack or float, which basically means that they can move the most without affecting your overall project end date or deadlines. But that being said, some of your dates will probably change. And so that's where a lot of people get scared of using the leveling feature. All of a sudden their tasks are moving around and they get very confused, and it's when people usually stop using this feature. So keep that in mind, but if you have a properly built schedule with proper networking, that shouldn't be a problem. And the last thing to know about leveling is it cannot always resolve over allocations. So there can be situations where you try to use the leveling and you still have overallocated resources. It depends on your settings that you've chosen and some other factors, but there are situations in which automated leveling project just can't figure out a way to resolve the overallocation. So now we'll talk about some quick best practices. As I kind of mentioned, to use leveling, proper schedule networking is required. And by that, I mean building your critical path. And so if we think about developing an application, you have to write the code before you can test the code. And so you have to tell project those things by using links within your schedules and setting your predecessors and successors. Because if project doesn't know about your predecessors and successors, it cannot make conscious decisions in terms of which tasks to move, which tasks to not move, and where to put things. But if you have a properly networked schedule in which all your predecessors and successors are in place, leveling will be able to use that algorithm. Second best practice is to use the resource usage view. So we're going to show that here in the demo, but there is a view in Project Pro which will show your resources and what they are assigned. And generally speaking, it's best to use the leveling feature right in that view so that you can see the changes take effect. It's also very important that if you are going to do cross-project leveling, so that would be if you have more than one project open and you want to level tasks across two different projects, if you're in project server using a shared resource pool, you can do that. In fact, it's very useful to be able to do that, but it is required in that case that you are in that resource usage view. And so, as I mentioned on that, our next best practice is when you are doing those cross-project levelings, you do have to open all of the projects that you need to be leveled. The leveling tool cannot make changes to a project that you don't have open. And so it's very important that if your resources are being used across multiple projects, that you have the ability and access to be able to open all of those projects in order to level. If you do not have a project open, it will basically be considered the highest priority. In other words, it won't be affected by leveling. So the projects that you do have open will work around that project that you do not have open. And so it's important that if you need things to move in the projects that you don't have open, you need to open them. Otherwise, leveling cannot make the change. Secondly, on that one, if you're going to do cross-project leveling, priority is a very important feature to take advantage of. And you can set a project level priority. So you can tell project this project is more important than that project. And in that way, the project client will know when it's leveling which tasks to take priority over the other. Setting your scope is very important. So if your resource management, you really only care within a week, you say these tasks just need to get done within that week, or I just need to make sure that my resources have 40 hours within a week, set your scope to week by week. You don't need to go down to the day level. If you do care about the day level in terms of which day your tasks get done, then you need day by day in terms of your leveling scope. And so it's important to set that scope appropriately so that you don't pull your hair out if you don't need to. And if you do need that level of granularity, it's important so that you get down to that level of granularity. Otherwise, leveling won't move tasks day by day if you have it set to month by month, for example. And we'll show that here in the demo. Lastly, you want to set your capacity correctly. And so you want to make sure that your resources are set to that 40 hours a week or 8 hours a day or whatever you expect for those resources. So if you only want someone to spend 50% of their time on projects, you want to ensure that their capacity is only available for 50% of their time. And that way leveling will take the appropriate decisions when it's moving tasks and reassigning resources, and your over allocations will make sense. And just in summary, start with manually leveling a single resource. Don't jump right in and just turn on automatic leveling and have project just start moving all your stuff around. It's important to start small with anything. So if you start with just manually leveling a single resource at a time, then maybe once you get comfortable with that, we'll use the level all feature, which we'll show you in the demo. And then you can consider if that at that point, it's doing what you expect, you're very happy with the results, consider turning on automatic leveling. And so enough charts from there. We'll jump right into demoing now, which I think will start to make a lot more sense in terms of what this tool does. So let's go ahead and open up project. So what I've done is I've created a very simple, straightforward project. I built it around IT. I'm, an IT guy, so I built a project very simple about deploying an application from start to finish in 7 tasks, which is, not quite realistic, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to have 2 resources who are going to build the whole application in 7 tasks. So basically, we go from building the design to developing the application and writing the test cases to testing the application and deploying the application. And I have duration on these tasks, and I also have work on these tasks. And then I have 2 separate resources that will be doing some of the tasks. And rather than dive into all the nitty-gritty details, let's take a look at, whoopsie, and I just made a test there. Let me drag over, there we go, my Gantt chart, and we can look at this in a more visual format. So we can see here that the first 2 tasks currently, Bob, the project manager, is doing at the same time. And then he's going to do another task here where he's going to finalize the design. And then he's going to hand it over to Jim, the developer. Jim, the developer, has 2 tasks to do. He has to develop the application and write the test cases. And we can see that those are both dependent on Bob, the project manager, finishing the design. But currently we have Jim, the developer, working on both of those at the same time. And then we finish up the project. And so you can see here that when we have tasks that these resources are working at the same time, which is a good indication that they're going to be over allocated potentially, depending on how much work is in those tasks. And of course, I've designed this in such a way to cause an over allocation. But you'll notice that both of the situations where we have tasks going on at the same time, we have this indication here of the burning man icon or the red man icon. And there we go. Sorry about that. And so you can see there clearly just from this indication that there's an over allocation involved with this task. So from here, we want to dive in. First thing we want to do is let's look at the details. What's going on? So as we mentioned in our best practice, we want to use that resource usage view. So in your ribbon, if you're on the resource tab or several other tabs, you can come up to your far left button, which is your view control, and you'll find in this view selection the resource usage view. When we come here, we can see that this view is currently grouped by resource. So we have Bob and Jim. And then on a day-by-day basis, and you can change this timescale to what's appropriate for you, you can see the hours they are working. And I have also added a line for their over allocation. So we can see that Bob, the project manager, is actually a 50% resource. So he is designed to be worked 4 hours a day on projects, no more than 4 hours a day. That's his max capacity. And so we can see that on this Thursday here, Bob has 8 hours of work currently assigned, and on Friday he has 4 hours, so he's good there, he's good there, he's good there. But on Thursday, he's over allocated, and we can see that by the red icon. And I believe if we scroll back on Wednesday also, Bob is over allocated. And you can see right here using this over allocation line that Bob is over allocated by 4 hours. If this over allocation line is useful to you, to be able to turn that on, you can either right click right here. I find that's the easiest way. And then you can turn on various other fields in this details section, and one of those is over allocation. If you don't like it, you can just turn it off, and then you've just got work. We can see that the same situation is true for Jim. So Jim is a full-time resource for this project, so he's 8 hours a day. But we can see that on this Thursday and Friday here, Jim has 16 hours of work scheduled, so he is over allocated on that Thursday, Friday. If we want to see the details of this, we can expand any resource. And so we can see, if we expand Bob, we can see the task that Bob is assigned to here. And we can see that on this Wednesday, Bob has 4 hours gathering user stories and requirements. and then another 4 hours building the initial design spec. And so those two combined add up to our top line of 8. He's over allocated. So we need to be able to move one of these two out to a different date. If we open up Jim and go look at his real quick, we'll see the same thing, that on this Thursday and Friday, Jim is working on both developing the application and writing the test cases. And so he's over allocated for 16 hours. So what we want is we need to move one of those two tasks out to a different date, or at least the work for those tasks out, so that these resources are no longer over allocated. Up in our resource tab in our ribbon, you'll notice there's a section for level. In this section, you have several options. You can level an individual resource. You can level all resources. You can change your options. You can undo your leveling, and you can step through your over allocations. I'm just going to go ahead and click level all and show you what happens. So after we've clicked level all, I just click the one button. You'll notice that no one's red anymore. It resolved our over allocations. Something happened. So what happened? We'll start here and take a look. If we remember that Bob was over allocated on this Wednesday and Thursday, he now only has 4 hours because the work from this build initial design spec task has been moved. And if we scroll over, we can go and look and see, where did that work go? It looks like it moved out all the way out here. So we need to go take a look at, or actually that's the testing of the application. I think I missed it somewhere. It moved it right here. There we go. On this Monday and Tuesday. So we can see that now on that Monday and Tuesday, that's all that Bob's working on, and so he's not over allocated. If we look at Jim the developer was over allocated on this Monday and Tuesday. And so we can see that he's still developing the application on that Monday and Tuesday, but now we've moved out the work for writing the test cases all the way out to this Monday and Tuesday a few weeks later. And so let's flip back to our Gantt chart view and let's see what that's done to our schedule. So when we come back, we'll go ahead and look at our Gantt chart and visually. And if we remember previously, these two first tasks of building the initial design spec and gathering our requirements were overlapping. They were right here. And you can see now that leveling has decided to move the build initial design spec out to the next week. This has affected our schedule because now this task had to move because it's dependent on it, which is finalizing the design. Same situation happened for Jim the developer. So Jim the developer was originally working on developing the application and writing the test cases at the same time. After leveling, you can see that writing the test cases moved from originally right here, the beginning of this task, out to after he has completed the application, because project was able to determine that Jim can't work on both these items at the same time. So you can see that leveling did what we expect to resolve the over allocations, and it made our schedule much more realistic. I did move our dates out, so our project is now later than we originally planned, which is unfortunate, but that is the reality of the situation. And if we'd left it in an overallocated state, that probably would have been the end result anyway. We just may have not known that occurred. If you ever do need to undo your leveling, if you did something, you're like, oh my God, what happened? You can use this clear leveling button, say clear it for the entire project, and everything will go back to the way it was before. And so if you go out and try it out and you have a panic attack and maybe you accidentally saved and you're like, oh no, I need to undo, you can clear your leveling that way. You can also use the undo option, of course, if you've just done it. You can level your resources resource by resource. You can also level them task by task. I would recommend starting with using this level resource button and going a single resource at a time. Start with your most critical resources when you do this, so that way they get leveled first and you're less critical to your project resources would come second. And then the last button I want to show you is this leveling options button. So when you hit here, all of your leveling options will become available to you. And I mentioned automatic leveling. So in here is where you could turn that on, and this will automatically level your schedule as you're working, much like how tasks move out when you have them linked. You can turn on leveling to just be automatic, and when you open your project, if something has changed, it'll re-level, and leveling will occur automatically. This would be where you'd look for your over allocation, so you can do day by day, the month by month, the week by week, minute by minute. whatever you like. And then down below here is where you have your other leveling options that I mentioned in the presentation earlier. So in summary, let's go ahead and bring our presentation back up here. In summary, what we've just covered is, leveling can be used to automatically resolve your resource over allocations. It's not as scary as a feature as it might seem on the surface if you understand how it works, and maybe try it out with a simple test project like I just created now so that you can see it working before going and trying it on your 500-line project. Leveling can move work. All leveling does is move work from one time period to another, and so that doesn't necessarily always resolve the overallocation, and sometimes it makes more sense to just reassign the task to somebody else rather than moving the work. Very important for leveling is a strongly networked project, so ensuring all your predecessors and successors are in order before you start using leveling. That way project has all the things it needs to ensure success while leveling. And even if this feature worked just great out of the box, no matter what, it's awesome, every time it does what I want, automatic leveling will never replace the need for a project manager. So don't worry about losing your job to this tool. It's definitely not going to happen. You definitely still have to manage your schedule. You still have to look at the results after leveling and ensure that they make sense. And usually you still have to make a few tweaks here or there. But leveling should hopefully take the brunt of the work out, and at least get you a good head start on your resource allocations. So Pam, I think that's it. Do we have any questions?
Thanks, Kevin. There was only 2 questions. One I forwarded on to you because it takes us a little off topic, and the other question I was able to answer. So I think we're good right there.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, I wanted to thank you, Kevin, and thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We welcome your questions, suggestions, and we want your feedback for sure. So for more information, you're welcome to please contact Kevin or myself, Pam Greensky. And once you exit today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you would complete and submit the survey in order to get your PDUs. You'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. We do upload most of our webinar Wednesdays to our YouTube channel, and so you can also go there to find lots of information and free training on lots of Microsoft technologies and project management methodologies. On behalf of AdvisaCon, Kevin, and myself, we wanted to thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you guys participate in future webinars. And have a great rest of your Wednesday, everyone.